Welcome to the Iguana Chronicles, the podcast where we dive into the wild world of South Florida's invasive iguanas. I'm your host, Michael Ronquillo, and each week we'll explore the fascinating history of these creatures, share thrilling tales from the front lines of iguana removal, and provide essential tips for homeowners and business dealing with these scaly invaders. Get ready for an adventure in wildlife management and education right here on the Iguana Chronicles. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Iguana Chronicles podcast. My name is Mike. I'm the owner of Humane Iguana Control. So we have an iguana removal company that services all of South Florida due to the infestation of iguanas that we have. The infestations have been, taking over all areas throughout South Florida, many urban areas, schools, associations. It's been a huge mess, having all these iguanas around. And on this episode, we want to talk about how invasive iguanas impact our ecosystem and our native species. Now, remember, green iguanas are not from South Florida. They're actually from Central and South America. So these iguanas came in the 1960s through the pet trade, through the pet market. And a lot of people buy these iguanas when they're small and just release them to the wild. We talked about that on our first episode of, how they became an infestation. So releasing these iguanas to the wild is actually illegal. And up to now, you cannot own an iguana as of now. You can go buy them or have them as pets. If you did in the past, they had a law that you could, just chip them and you could keep your old iguana, and that wasn't a problem. Now, since the 1960s, these iguanas have become a problem for our native species in our ecosystem. Iguanas outcompete our native species for food, meaning that iguanas will eat certain plants that our native animals eat, and it outcompetes our native species for those food sources. So you can imagine, to give you an example, if there's a certain plant, let's say a certain flowering plant that our native species eat, these iguanas will go in and just eat up the entire plant and not leave any food resources for our native species. So that's one way that native invasive iguanas impact our ecosystem, is by outcompeting our native species for food. Birds as well. There's a certain a fruit or seed that birds eat, and these iguanas are constantly eating them. And these native species can't find these food sources. They'll start, going elsewhere looking for them, and it could come to the point that there's not enough food resources, which will end up declining our native species population. There's been studies that iguanas go into our native species burrows. The gopher tortoise digs burrows to lay their eggs, and so does the burrowing owl. So it's been documented that these iguanas will go into these burrows of these native species to destroy their eggs or even eat their eggs and to lay their eggs. The more common iguana that does this is more like the spiny toe iguana. This iguana is a little more aggressive in our opinion, and they've been known to eat eggs and other animals. So they'll go into these burrows, destroy their eggs of our native species, and just to lay their eggs. And this declines the population of our native species, and all this plays a huge impact in our ecosystem. A lot of these animals are actually endangered species, or were endangered species. I remember reading this one article of it was about the Miami blue butterfly in the Keys. This species also was endangered, and what was happening is the iguanas were eating this plant. It was called the nigger bean plant. So this is a host where these butterflies, the Miami blue butterfly, lays their eggs. And the iguanas were just constantly eating these plants, so these butterflies had nowhere to lay their eggs. So this was a huge decline on the Miami blue butterfly population. I'm not saying the iguanas are not are the only reason why that population is declining, but that's one of the reasons why they're being impacted. The burrowing owl as well, like we mentioned, burrowing owls are an endangered species, and they like to dig burrows underground to lay their bird eggs, and there's been documentation of these iguanas just going to these burrows and just, pretty much destroying whatever the burrowing owl created in these burrows. So that's another way how these iguanas are impacting our native species in our ecosystem. To me, it doesn't make any sense not to do anything about this. A lot of people say, what are you doing with these iguanas? Just leave them alone. They're not doing anything. Iguanas do a lot more than what people think. They impact our ecosystem, our native species, our economy, and they cause a lot of property damage as well. The iguanas have very few predators in South Florida, especially in urban areas. Iguanas in the wild, like in canals and different spots where there are predators, like alligators and large snakes and large birds, the iguanas can be a little bit controlled by these predators. But when you go into urban areas, they have very few predators. Let's say if you live in a house in Coral Gables, yeah, you might have some garden snakes, some owls, some hawks that might, eat some iguanas, but the ratio is it's not even close to, to controlling the population from our native predators. So the reason why we started this company is to help our ecosystem and is to help our native species. That's one of the main reasons why we started Humane Iguana Control. Um, we saw all the damages and all the impacts that iguanas were doing, and we're like, damn, we have to do something about this because it's out of control. Just like the Burmese pythons in the Everglades and the lionfish in the ocean, these non-native species are impacting our native species. So well, that's why one of the reasons we started this company is just to try and control the population of iguanas. The outcompeting of the food for our native species is a common thing we see. We see these iguanas in the wild just constantly eating native plants, and it just reduces the food sources for for all of our species. These the iguanas also not only impact the plant species for native species, they also spread non-native plants. And what does this mean? So iguanas will eat certain plants that are non-native, which are kind of like weeds and overgrown brush. So when they eat these seeds and they go along their day just defecating, these new seeds will literally just hatch, will sprout, and this starts spreading these invasive plants throughout South Florida. So that's another problem. And when these bushes and trees grow, it lessens the likelihood that our native plants will grow in those areas due to these non-native plants just overpopulating and growing. So those are just some of the ways that invasive iguanas are impacting our ecosystem and our native species. So our goal is to help control the population of iguanas throughout South Florida. We've removed thousands and thousands of iguanas since we started, and it's made a huge improvement in some areas. We've eradicated iguanas from schools, from homes, from associations. And what that means is instead of having 50 to 100 iguanas, they only get one or two every once in a while, which is a huge improvement. So we're really happy that we're doing our part to try and help the ecosystem and our native species. They mean a lot to us. We enjoy watching these burrowing owls and migratory butterfly. They're both beautiful species. They're incredible. So that's all we got for this episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it and you shared a little bit of education about how iguanas impact our native species and our ecosystem. We want to hear from you guys. We hope you like this episode. If you have any questions, send us a message. Make sure to share, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning into the episode of the Iguana Chronicles. We hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the challenges and triumphs of managing South Florida's iguana population. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Stay informed and stay proactive. Together we can make a difference. Until next time, keep an eye out for those iguanas.